Muslims in Small Heath in Birmingham. Tim Rustem joins us, lawyer who specialises in terrorism cases. Where is the law letting the Home Secretary down at the moment then, Tim?
Well, the problem at the moment is that... good evening, by the way.
Good evening.
The problem at the moment is that the law tackles anybody advocating or participating in violent protest or glorifying terrorism. And what the government is concerned with, seems from what we've heard, is that they want to tackle people who are perhaps slightly below the surface. In other words, people who aren't advocating violent extremism, but whose values don't match those of British society. And that's, I think, where the problem lays.
The trouble here is how you word it specifically enough to capture those people without isolating people like, for example, David Davis, the Conservative MP, who said today that if you had a law which stopped you speaking in public if you offended people, that would stop him giving speeches.
Well, it is. I mean, this is the problem. When you sort of have this type of legislation proposed without really having it thought through, you are in danger of catching a lot of, effectively, people who have different political views to the government, people who perhaps may question foreign policy decisions made, and who have legitimate concerns, but who aren't, in a normal definition of the word, a terrorist. Terrorism is somebody who glorifies or who encourages terrorist violent acts. Now, there's a lot of people the government's concerned with. If you see the recent arrests of Chowdhury and Trevor Brooks, Abu Izzadeen, these are people they regard as rabble-rousers, people whose views they don't believe match those of the British public. And they, to expand legislation to capture people like that brings in danger sort of the misuse of the law to effectively curtail freedom of speech, freedom of dissension, questioning of government decisions, that sort of thing.
See, David Cameron, I heard today, describe some of those people you mentioned as just on the right side of the law, but only just. In other words, they know what they're doing, they know what they can and can't say. If you bring in new laws, surely they'll just know the right side of those too, won't they?
Well, I mean, to give you an example, they're talking about extreme disturbance or disruption orders. Now, these are very easily obtainable if they do, take this action. And effectively, it would stop somebody putting sort of posts onto social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, and so on. And it would require them to give advance notice of any disclosure or publication to the police, to vets. And that's a very dangerous slope if you start going down that road, where you are containing both the media's ability to report and also people's ability to express their views. I mean, where would you draw the line? For instance, would this capture the BNP, whose views are not shared by the vast majority of the British public? Their views arguably cause distress as well to ordinary members of the public. So there is a very sort of dark side of this, which we have to explore fully before allowing the government to go ahead and implement laws which further restrict, effectively freedom of speech.
How similar are these proposals from Theresa May to the days of Northern Ireland and Gerry Adams appearing on the news with his words being spoken by an actor?
Well, it's exactly the same. I mean, if you remember the broadcasting restraint, back in 1988 to 94, effectively the media used actors to step in and speak on behalf of Gerry Adams, Martin McGuinness, and so on. So effectively, the rights of the media to actually report what's being said by these individuals was curtailed. They didn't actually stop them getting their message across, and that's the problem. I think it needs to be thought out a little bit more carefully. The other problem is it's going to be open to challenge if it's held to be incompatible with elements of the European Convention of Human Rights and Human Rights Act. Then somebody could actually challenge this as a violation and bring proceedings against the UK in Strasbourg. And that has dangerous consequences as well. As
a lawyer, what's your view on whether we should allow these people to have their opinions or not? Are you in the camp that it's better to hear what they say, no matter how insightful or dangerous it might be, or actually do you believe they should be silenced?
Well, if you think about who this is trying to target, this is, I think, what Michael Gove described as draining the swamp, effectively, not just going for the sort of crocodiles that raise their heads. But essentially what they're talking about is people whose views are not shared by the members of the normal British public, people who challenge the idea of democracy, who advocate Sharia law in this country, people who encourage Muslim groups or challenge the government's foreign policy decisions. Now, we may not like their views. Personally, I would like to have their views aired, whether it's through the media, television programs, radio programs, and allow those to be argued. Allow the sort of majority of people who's intelligent enough to understand that these things don't make sense to actually, argue against that. I think that's the better way to deal with it rather than driving it underground.
And I think in one of your earlier answers, Tim, you referred to them as rabble-rousers. Are there current laws which we're just not utilising well enough to prosecute a rabble-rouser, or does it actually need a new law?
Well, there's a range of legislation that can be used. I mean, even if you break it right down, there's the public order offences, which can be utilised. But going further up, I mean, the Terrorism Act 2000 already has extensive powers. So we can already see, I mean, if you look at our legislation in this country, there's a range of issues where they can pre-charge detentions, probably the longest in any comparable democracy. We have control orders that were used. We have a number of different mechanisms to curtail people's movements, the removal of material from the internet. I think now to take it further and to allow, on quite a low threshold, to bring in various extreme disruption orders and so on, which will stop somebody speaking their minds, stop somebody expressing their views. However much we may not agree with those views, I think is very dangerous.
Tim, thank you for joining us on 5 Live tonight. Tim Rustem, lawyer who specialises in terrorism cases, giving his reaction to some of the Home Secretary's proposals for the next Conservative manifesto and tackling extremism. 10:57.